You know, at this point, if you've made it through the first video and you're on this one, you either really love the Halloween franchise or you really like me. And there's a lot of content on the Halloween franchise out there, so love you too. Halloween series retrospective. This is our second video. Today we're going to be covering Halloween 3 and Halloween 4. Return of Michael Myers, I think is the name of that one. Anyway, same format as the last video. Let's dig right in. Halloween 3 was directed by Tommy Lee Wallace and it came out in 1982. My experience with this movie is very different from the cultural experience when it came out. A little background. When this movie came out, no one really told people that it wasn't going to be a sequel to Halloween 2. Feels like a mistake to me. I'm sure it was advertised, but the goal for this, John Carpenter's original idea for Halloween, was that they would do the original Halloween, and then they would go on and do an anthology series for the rest of the movies. So it would just be different stories set on Halloween, but not necessarily following Michael Myers. Which is why in this movie, the only time we actually see Myers, it's in a trailer for Halloween the movie coming out in this kind of side pocket universe that they've set this movie in. I'll address this more later, but quite honestly, I think this is a brilliant idea. And it's a shame that people, I don't know who to blame on this, because you should probably tell people if you're going to make a sequel to a movie, but connect it 0%. If anything, they should have just called it Halloween Season of the Witch. I also think calling it Halloween 3 was probably not the director's decision or anyone creatively involved. That's a blind guess, but it just reeks of that studio kind of being like,
we need to make money. People need to know it's a sequel.
Like just using the name Halloween wouldn't be enough. Anyway, that was the general experience as people went, there was no Michael Myers, and they were pretty upset because it was like, what is this? Now, I had the benefit of seeing it like 30 years later, so I suppose I was benefited by that. My opinion of this movie is way higher because I was able to just go, okay, this one's not going to have Michael in. So I was able to put that aside and just address this for what it is. We'll get to this on a different video, but that's a thing that maybe people could use to do a little more of these days. I actually love this movie so much that I maybe made my wife take a solid 45-minute detour on our road trip through California to Lolita, California, where they shot a lot of the Silver Shamrock production facility scene. It had been affected by an earthquake, so it was definitely broken down, but it was really cool to see that place that I'd watched so many times in a movie. And I definitely didn't take a little souvenir, and it's for sure not one of my most prized possessions, and I really truly hope this won't affect me in any legal sense or in terms of curses. All right, first category, my favorite kill in Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. Instantly, my format has failed me because this is not a slasher. So there's like maybe 3 to choose from. The answer is so obvious to me, it's not even funny. I think the best kill in this movie, and maybe one of the better kills in the franchise, is the test of the masks. So you've got that family in the room, kids watching TV, and then you see what is going to happen with these Silver Shamrock masks. It's so gross. All the bugs and the snakes coming out of the mask, killing the kid, and then they kill the family. Like, this is such a dark movie. I feel like most movies these days just, they won't push certain boundaries. You know, not that they'll never kill a kid, but if they do, it's got to be some big important thing. And this one, I mean, I guess spoilers for the movie, but it leads up to many child deaths. I think the mask test scene is the thing that sets us up so well for the finale. The stakes are so much higher because it's not just, oh, they'll be dangerous or they'll go crazy. Like we see, they will die, like for sure, in the most grotesque way possible. It's also just an incredibly creepy scene. The layering of tension is top-notch, one of the best scenes in the franchise. That leads us pretty quickly into my positives for this movie. Similar note, the mask designs in this are just incredible. You got the pumpkin, the skeleton, and the witch, all 3 of which I think are instant classic designs. I want to get these masks and just put them on a mantle. It's so amazing to me that they have jumped in terms of my appreciation for them instantly to equal the Michael Myers mask just in terms of design. Actually, trying to think if this is true. I would say, design-wise, I don't think there is a bad villain mask in the Halloween franchise. Execution-wise, there are a lot of bad masks. Actually, we'll get to that in this video. Anyway, there's a lot of positives in Halloween 3. Tom Atkins is an incredible lead. The vibe is really good. I think there's a lot of really good scares, and I also just really appreciate that it does something completely different. Much like Halloween 1 did, this feels like it's genuinely trying to do something that we've never seen before, and I think it completely succeeds at that. I would also be remiss if I didn't mention the music in this movie. Halloween has the best score in all of horror. Halloween 3 has maybe the second best. The March of the Pumpkins song is, it's on repeat this season. I cannot get enough. It's peak 80s score. This feels like it leans back into that kind of creepy, gross synth and not in the punky pop synth. I don't know if that means anything. I know pretty much nothing about music. All I can say is this score is tremendous, and I definitely recommend listening to it if you haven't, just on its own. One final positive, there's kind of a twist sort of in this movie. You start to realize that Silver Shamrock obviously is evil, but you start to see what they're doing and that it's not just, big corporation do a bad thing. They're like working with the dark arts and doing some crazy shit. I think that twist works really well, probably exclusively because this isn't set in the original Halloween universe. It feels a little bit more heightened. It feels like something that you would get not in this universe, but in a slightly adjacent one. It's a pretty cool blend of like cult folk horror and techno horror. I don't know exactly how they made that work, but it works really well. Now, in terms of negatives for Halloween 3, I don't have a ton. I think this movie's really good. Again, I understand why people don't like it, but I don't think most of the criticism was for the movie as a whole. I think it's just that it wasn't what people were expecting. And as a general rule, when people don't get what they're expecting or hoping for, they just mark it off as bad and not go, okay, it's different from what I thought. Do I like it now? This is a cultural problem that to this day is just so infuriating to me because it's not big enough to do anything about, but it's not small enough to not bother me. I don't know, there's probably people who really hate this movie just for what it is. I am not one of them. I think the only thing that I can say is it gets a little bit lost about halfway through. The second act of this movie doesn't really hold up as well as the first and third. It just gets a little slow and it feels like you're a couple of paces ahead in terms of what's going to happen, and the movie has to kind of catch up with you. Even with that, that's not really a huge problem, especially since the first and third acts really make up for any lack that there might be in the second. I think if I have to have any real negative for this movie, and kind of it's my final thought on the movie, this thing is so good and it's a shame that more people don't appreciate it. I know that it's starting to kind of build a cult following, and hopefully that becomes something that people really recognize as a great movie. But it's a shame that the reception for this movie was as bad as it was, because I think the idea of doing an anthology series where every movie is set on Halloween but it's all completely different, I love that. Like, I would love to see more of that. And you can cross over a little bit, have little moments where you see a Silver Shamrock mask just in the background, or, so kind of like what they did having Myers appear on the TV. That kind of thing, I think, would work really well. I just get this feeling, and it's based on pretty much nothing other than A24 right now in this exact moment, 2023, year of our Lord, is kind of trying to bid for the rights to Halloween, but I don't think they're going for the rights to Michael Myers' Halloween. I could be wrong about this, but I think they're trying to get the rights to a Season of the Witch type thing, which if there's ever been an 80s semi-slasher that could be adapted for an A24 series or movie or whatever, it's this. Like, it's definitely this. Nothing else. The only other thing is also called Season of the Witch. But, like, they're probably going to do better with this. And I hope that they get it, because I would love to see this idea extrapolated into something else. This movie is tremendous. It's a great entry into the Halloween franchise, albeit kind of the black sheep in the whole series. So good, though. And I'm weirdly glad that it's a part of Halloween. It adds a gravitas that some of the later sequels don't really have. And I really appreciate that. And now on to Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, directed by Dwight H. Little. It came out in 1988. My experience with this movie is pretty limited, quite honestly. I watched it last year in prep for Halloween Ends. Thought it was fine. I don't know, I thought it was all right. In rewatching for this series, I don't know that my opinion has changed a whole ton. I think everything that I liked is better, and everything that I didn't like is probably about the same. So yeah, I guess I like it more. I like this movie. I don't dislike it. I just don't think it's like spectacular. My favorite kill in Halloween 4 was a little bit hard to find. There's not a ton of super great kills. It becomes pretty clear to me that someone in this, I don't know if that was Dwight Little or a producer, I'm not sure, someone wanted to make this an action movie, and somebody else, it feels like, wanted to make this a straight horror movie like the first 2 and 3 technically, but more akin to the first 2. This is kind of a weird little entry because both sort of win out. The first good chunk, I would say 2/3 of this movie, are pure Halloween horror and probably my favorite parts of the movie. And then the last kind of final act is split 50-50 between this weird Assault on Precinct 13 kind of action movie where Michael is storming a house, and some of those scenes in there are very much horror and they feel very much like a Michael Myers scene. That said, my 2 favorite kills in the movie are at the beginning and the end. The first, maybe the first kill in the movie, the thumb through the forehead in the ambulance. It's goofy and ridiculous, but there's something about it that I love so much. And then my favorite kill at the end of the movie kind of goes directly against what I just said because it really has elements of both the horror and the action side. Michael kills a cop and he kind of sets his body up so Kelly will come in and be scared. And then Michael takes a shotgun and instead of shooting her, which I was really glad about, I couldn't remember watching it this time if he shot her or not, and that would have really taken me out of it. Instead, he chooses to take it and just stab through her with the barrel of a shotgun. That's some John Wick shit right there. And I don't know what to tell you because it does go against what I said, but it's just so good. And I wasn't expecting it. I think that's what worked for me is I was so worried that he was going to shoot her that when he just impaled her, I was like, okay, all right. Even though there are definitely things about this that I don't totally love, there's a lot to love in this movie. Especially rewatching it this time, something about this movie really stood out to me in a way that it never had before, which is Danielle Harris's Jamie Lloyd. She's the daughter of Laurie Strode, and that's a hard kind of role to play, I would imagine, because you're trying to follow up on this incredible portrayal of a character, but also be your own person, and also she's like, 10? 8? I'm not entirely sure, but she's little. Like, she's a little kid. Honestly, the whole thing kind of hinges on her. If she didn't work, none of this would have worked. It would have been a terrible movie. With a worse child actor, it would have been genuinely unwatchable. Some other kind of just little positives. The opening of this movie, just random shots of an empty town. It really solidifies that Haddonfield has gotten hollow. It's gotten kind of dark. People just aren't the same anymore. That ties into the whole mob mentality thing that comes in later, which is, I don't know, I probably won't talk much about that because it's all right. It's an idea. But those opening shots are haunting. Just cornfields and windmills and houses, but nobody's ever in shot, and you see the breeze. It just feels cold and empty, and it sets the tone for this whole movie very well. There's also just a great scene where Loomis who, by the way, another wonderful positive, you get more Donald Pleasance. It's always good. It's always good to get more Donald Pleasance, especially when he's just yelling at everybody now. You just can't go wrong. Anyway, there's a scene where Donald Pleasance is trying to find Michael, and he sees a Michael, and you're like, oh, this is it. And then he sees another Michael and another one, and there's just like, it's stupid kids, which, granted, kind of dark for kids to put on the mask of like an actual murderer in real life. But you know what? It doesn't even matter. That's such a great scene because he just has like a full-blown meltdown. It's so good. I love it. Donald Pleasance, I know that people appreciate him, but just like not enough. No one will ever be able to appreciate his work enough. There's also a great scene where he actually runs into Michael. He's at this convenience store and Michael still has the bandages, which is a great look for him. I want to make this as clear as possible. They should have kept the bandages this whole movie. They really, really should have. It's a travesty that they didn't. Anyway, they have like a standoff. It's just a haunting scene. It's really good. And I also think as much as the last kind of third of this movie is a little bit more action heavy and not in the Michael Myers killing kind of way, but in the shooting guns and explosions kind of way, that ending, man, is just so bleak. Both of these movies actually have just incredibly bleak endings. But man, just that ending with Jamie Lloyd standing at the top of the stairs in the clown costume with a scissors, I think, and there's just like blood all over. It's just, oh, and Donald Pleasance just being like, no, no. It's such a dark ending and it fits so perfectly in the franchise. I really do like this movie quite a bit. I will say some of the negatives I've kind of already, the back third where everyone's trying to shoot Michael as many times as possible, I don't know. I get that you have to kind of up the stakes for a horror sequel. I just don't think that that's the direction you should do it in. I think it should be more the other way. There should be more kills. What Halloween 2 is to Halloween, this should be to Halloween 2. But it just isn't. It feels like they just went, no, we liked the explosion bit in Halloween 2. What if we just did so much more of that? I don't hate it. It just doesn't totally reconcile with the rest of the movie feeling like this tight little slasher. I don't know. That's such a little nitpick. I've talked a lot about it, but really there's only 2 or 3 scenes that it ever bothers me. One of them is like on the truck where Michael's killing everybody and nobody hears it. Then the whole like shooting him, the whole cavalry of cops shooting him at the end, that just doesn't work for me. I don't know why. I think it just feels a little bit like an overreaction. Granted, he killed like 8 or 10 people, I think, something like that, which is a lot. I mean, that's a lot of people to kill. I'm not saying that they shouldn't have shot him at all. That just feels to me more like Friday the 13th Part 9, where they're like, we have to just send in the army because nothing else will kill this guy. That feels like a reaction to that kind of character, where Michael has not shown himself to be that kind of character, aside from getting shot a couple of times. I don't know. Again, all of this, when I say it, sounds really petty, and I guess it kind of is. But it is the thing that I like least about this movie. Actually, that's not true. Okay, so the thing I genuinely like least about this movie is the bullies in Jamie's school. I understand that they're supposed to be bullies. We're not supposed to root for them. But holy shit, they pull 0 punches. They're just like chanting, Jamie's an orphan, Jamie's uncle's the boogeyman. Like, who raised these kids? Oh man, I keep forgetting negatives. The Michael's mask, when he gets his actual mask in this movie, it's not good. It's not the worst mask in the franchise, but it's definitely not the best. It looks really cheap, and I get that it's supposed to be kind of a cheap dollar store mask, but man, they made us believe that it was a cheap mask in the first one and it still looked good, so what is your excuse? Overall, Halloween 4 Return of Michael Myers, it's not perfect, but it's a really solid sequel. I feel like it does a good job capturing a lot of the energy of the first 2 while also bringing something new, which I do respect that they tried something with it, even if it doesn't totally work for me. It's a very dreamlike sequel. I think it leans pretty hard into that side of Halloween 2, which I have no problem with. I liked that a lot. It develops Dr. Loomis really, really well and introduces us to Jamie Lloyd, who turns out I think is really, really good. She's now one of my favorite characters in the series. Yeah, I don't know. I really like this movie. It's definitely not on the same level as the first 3 even, but definitely not the first 2, but I don't know, it doesn't have to be. Like, it still can be a good movie without being a perfect movie. Thank you for watching this video and checking out my channel. If you want to hear more of my thoughts on the Halloween series, stay tuned, because I'm doing all of them. I'm doing every single one of them. I can't wait for some of that. Let me know what else you want me to review. I can do movies, TV shows, comics, felt pens, whatever you want. Comment down below what you're interested in hearing from me, or what you think of Halloween 3 Season of the Witch and Halloween 4 Return of Michael Myers. That's the first time I've said those together, and it's incredibly long. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit the little bell. Or do none of those things, because I am not your dad. Just doesn't feel like it has exact... In rewatching for this series, for this series, Tension is spectacular, directed by Dwight